the little things that I always forget about when we talk about prepping a room.
Yeah.
Is sanding, taping. Well, first you got to tape things up.
Yes.
And that's a long, arduous job.
That's the most arduous job.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, especially if they do it themselves, they skip it.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is roof or no roof.
Oh, yeah.
So do you need to repaint that ceiling? Now, generally, ceilings don't need to be repainted as much as walls, because obviously kids and wear don't tend to get to the ceiling unless you've gone utterly crazy after a couple of margaritas. So, but again, after a number of years, it will start to yellow. They're normally white, aren't they? So it'll start to yellow. So there's a decision to be made whether or not you're doing it. If you're painting the ceiling, it's really easy to paint a ceiling, assuming that you've got the pole and the other bits and bobs, and you don't even need to cut it if you're going to paint the walls as well. So therefore, go over the edge, do the edges first, without a doubt, with a paintbrush, go over the edge, and then let it dry properly. If you don't let it dry properly, so that normally would be 3 to 4 hours, then at that point, when you put the tape on, it'll look absolutely fine. You'll get your walls done, and then you pull the tape off, and it all comes off with it. That's when you're in deep, deep trouble. Mm. Now, that actually still happens anyway if you're just painting the walls, because there's quite a lot of dodgy paint here in Dubai. Mm. There was a certain brand that is produced somewhere near a roundabout in Sharjah that is named the same, or traditionally colloquial name the same.
Yeah, that roundabout's gone now.
It has gone.
But it's still called that. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And just in case you didn't know that, they reminded us a few years ago where unfortunately during a fire, their paint was fired onto the roundabout as it was then nearby. That is just an utter disaster. Without a doubt. Actually, this is important to say that it's for latex-based paint, and that oil paint is a lot better. So that's the first thing. Second thing is type of paint that you use. So for walls, don't use oil paint. Don't use oil-based paint. It is latex that you need. Emulsion, it's also called. You can either use matte or vinyl silk. There is only those two versions. Yeah. Mm. Which is a halfway house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds nice.
It's useful when you've got high traffic areas or kids.
Okay.
The problem is it comes with a half sheen.
Oh, okay.
And therefore, with that half sheen, you can see imperfections in the walls. So if you've got rubbish walls, you want matte so that it doesn't highlight all of those rubbish areas.
Right. Okay.
Oh, we missed your sanding in between, didn't we?
Yeah.
So that's filling.
Okay. So would we've taped before we do the sanding and the filling?
Depends where the filling is. Okay. To be fair, the way we work in teams of two, you'll have somebody filling at the same time as you've got somebody taping. Okay. If you're doing it yourself, probably finish the filling first, thinking about it on the whole. Generally speaking, the whole idea with filling is to use as little filler as possible.
Right.
But it shrinks. So the way you want to do it is do it twice. Take it down. Do not leave any excess on there first time round. Let it shrink in, put a second coat, just literally a skim coat over it. It will dry really quickly. And then the lightest of sands is all you require. Mm. If you overdo it, you've got a pain in the neck on your hands, because if the rest of the wall has been painted more than once, there'll be a certain texture to it. When you sand it, the whole area, because you've got to over sand it, the whole area becomes smooth, which means when you paint it, you can see the difference, especially if you're using vinyl silk.
Okay.
So therefore,
this vinyl silk is sounding like the paint I do not want to use.
It's difficult. But again, if you are in a high traffic area, matte, because it has less latex in it, does not stand up as well.
So fill the holes, fill the cracks,
tape it. Yeah. Edges next. Okay. So
edges.
Start with the edges with a paintbrush. So that way,
so there's no shortcuts here.
No,
really.
There is no shortcut there. There are all sorts of gadgets that you'll see in Ace Hardware. You know, these foam corner jobbies. Garbage, doesn't work.
Oh, really?
Absolutely rubbish.
They're going to tell me they're great.
It's rubbish.
Yeah, okay.
Without a doubt. It's a paintbrush, without a doubt, is the only way to really do it properly. Give yourself a decent area. So you should be
new paintbrush, or just a nice cleaned one that I've got sitting in the backyard?
Okay, so there's a halfway house here.
And you've got the cheapest paintbrush there. I got my 2 Durham paintbrush versus my 20 Durham paintbrush.
Okay, so the difference in paintbrushes, you can go pretty cheap. To give you an idea, I will normally use, if I'm doing my own, I'll normally use a 1 inch for latex painting, and I'll pay 7 dirhams for that.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I will accept a few problems with that 7 dirham paintbrush. It will drop the odd hair,
Yeah.
and I will fish it out with my finger because it's water-based paint, and I can clean my hands really quickly. For a 20 dirham paintbrush, in fact, probably more than that, you'd be looking at like a natural bristle, which is finer, really good for oil-based paints. Will work perfectly well for latex. It's just a little bit overkill, considering you're going to go over the top of the majority of the paint that you've just done for the corners, both sides of the corner. Or the top with a roller. So the idea is that the roller will actually create the final finish rather than anything else. Okay. Normally, for roller painting, you would want something of a medium nap. So you don't want
but back to the side. So with the brushes, make sure that I do all the corners and stuff first with the brush. One coat, just one coat.
Yeah, one coat. You might need two. Just depends if you're doing a color contrast.
All right, but just get that done with the brush. There's no shortcut, so don't look for the shortcut. Just do it.
Just do it. Yeah, absolutely.
And then we can start thinking about the rollers.
A couple of inches either side. If you don't have much knowledge about brushes, stick with Harris. It's the main brand here, and they're solid. And their cheaper range is good as well. I just wouldn't. I don't know what it is over the years, but I literally look at a paintbrush, I give it a quick pull, and I know whether it's legit. But for most people who aren't as sad as I am, they probably just stick with Harris. You're fine.
Stick with Harris.
Yeah. So we're at the stage of painting. Right, critical thing. Make sure that you've got plenty of paint on your roller.
Which means you've got to have your drop cloths everywhere.
Yes, very good point.
So you've already taped everything up.
Yeah, it's part of the taping process. So normally we would have, rather than drop cloths, we would normally use plastic sheets.
So cover everything with plastic, cover your windows, got it all covered so that there is going to be no spillage anywhere.
You'd be amazed how far paint can flick off a roller. It never ceases to amaze me. So you cannot, it needs to look like a scene at CSI without a doubt before you start.
So again, that when we talked about the time investment, with the setup, after you've done your sanding, after you've done your filling your holes, and you've refilled them again, and then you've sanded them a little bit, you've taped up your ceiling, you've taped around your windows, you taped your floor, you put down your drop cloths, your plastic sheeting. That alone is going to take you quite a while to do. 2
hours normally. About that.
That's before you even start painting.
Yeah, the painting's the quick bit. Yeah, that's nice and easy. It's all in the prep without a doubt. Yeah, actually, and the finish, which is kind of key as well. So we've then got to. So we are painting at this point, and let's assume that we now rollered all the walls, and you've got one coat on.
Right.
Take a step back. Have a quick look at your walls. If you are color contrasting, in fact, no, there's just a straight scenario here. There is no scenario whereby one coat is enough, unless the only reason you're doing it is because you've got a rubbish landlord who is insisting that you paint.
Right.
Again, still in that scenario, have a look again at the walls. If it does not look like an even finish, your landlord is still going to charge you, and you've wasted your time. So therefore, while you're there, put a second coat on. Okay. Now, there's certain colours that don't cover as well as others, which is interesting because I sat down with the head of Ace Paint Worldwide to have this discussion with him about the problems I've been having with his paint at the time. And he was very, very impressive, I must say. So I gave him the paint colours that I wanted him to paint with, and I showed him the problem. And they reformulated their paint.
Really?
Yes. So greens is an absolute classic. Reds are as well. And both of those...
they don't cover well.
They just don't cover well. It's just the pigment within it that is a real pain. So with those, and especially imagine if you're going light on those colours, it looks really patchy and can do even after 2 coats. Plan on 3 if you're going high contrast.
So that ups the amount of paint you're going to buy. So
yes,
you're looking at 3 gallons probably.
Well, the thing is, there's also an equator, which is...
An equator?
Yeah. The equator is price-wise between individual gallons and a drum, which is 4.8 gallons. I think that's right. That sounds right. We call it 5 gallon anyway, 5 gallon drum. And it basically sits at, normally, if the pricing is where it should be, it sits at about 2.6, 2.7 gallons is the equator of a big 5 gallon drum. So if in doubt, buy the drum because, and again, you might need touch-ups in the future. So assuming that you're going for it, then away you go. Now, standard though, if you're in a standard Dubai bedroom, again, it's a good one people can imagine. If you're in a standard Dubai bedroom and you're not doing a high contrast of colours, 2 gallons is enough.
Okay.
But it's close. It's really close. So if you knew what you're doing and you're confident and you're not doing a high contrast, 2 gallons. If you're getting either high contrast, so different colors between before and after, away you go. Next little trick, which is if you've got really dark walls and you're going to an off-white color.
Who would do that?
Plenty of people.
Okay.
If the property's been left in that condition and you're like this thing, and dark colors, I don't know why people do it.
Yeah.
But because it just closes in a room quite dramatically as far as I'm concerned. So stay light. However, in that scenario, instead of paying more to get the same top coat color that you're going to finish with, just buy white. White is the cheapest paint out there. Buy white, but buy good quality white. And therefore do one coat of all the walls. It's kind of called the knockback coat. And it just knocks out the majority of that colour. Because even if you put lots of off-white colours over the top of it, you tend to find that you don't get the same colour that you were planning with originally. It's always darker.
So you put a knockback on.
Put a knockback first and then go for the main colour.
And how long are we letting paint dry between coats?
So that's the big question mark here in Dubai. Because in the summer, if you didn't have AC in that room, by the time you'd finished on one corner, you could just keep going and away you go. If you've got the AC on, then it depends, because the AC itself will, dry out the walls because the circulation of air and an AC unit acts like a dehumidifier anyway. But equally, because you reduce the temperature, it's one of those where it's like, I just kind of know. Normally, assuming that you had the AC on at quite a rate, and again, when you're sanding, turn off the AC, otherwise it will totally destroy the coil, then I would still be able to keep going. So we wouldn't need to stop. Again, imagine lunch breaks, tea breaks, that kind of thing. Use that as drying time as well, because you're not going to be working on it anyway. So and put the breaks in where it works the best. Okay, next thing. We've got all the walls done. We're happy with the walls and the ceilings. Time to take off the tape.
Yes.
Okay.
So I've left it a couple hours though, right?
Yeah, ideally leave it a couple of hours before
overnight,
you do
maybe?
that. If you've got that time available, then yes.
Because if I'm doing it myself, I've got time. Although I'll be in a rush because we've already spent 2 days if we're doing it correctly.
Which is a weekend.
Yeah.
And you're back to work.
Yeah. And so, no one wants...
But again, the big advantage is because you've done the edges first with the brush, that's actually pretty old paint at this point. So normally you wouldn't have to wait too much longer unless you know you've got some overruns. Okay, so for matte, the tape will come off pretty easily without causing you too many problems. There's a good chance that some will have crept somewhere behind the tape, in which case you need to use just a Stanley blade or something to gently tease it off.
Gently.
If it's new...
Gently tease.
Yeah. If it's new, it should come off quite easily if it's latex paint, not oil-based. Okay? Now, the problem is vinyl silk. So the increased vinyl...
There's no reason I want to use that paint now. I mean, like you've dissuaded me.
Well, it is good for certain reasons.
You keep saying that, but now we got another problem detaping.
Wear abrasion is the whole point of it.
Wear abrasion.
But basically, that latex is a bit like, remember the PVA glue you used to have?
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Okay.
Now, the problem with PVA glue in paint is when you try and pull that tape off, it doesn't want to come off right.
Right.
So therefore, you need to use that Stanley blade down the edge of the tape to get a nice even cut before you pull it. If you do it as you pull it, the paint is already detached from the wall and you're in trouble.
Okay.
Certain brands are better than others for vinyl silk, and without a doubt, we'd always use Jotun. We wouldn't.
Okay.
It would take a customer, and we've had it before, to a customer for us to say, we don't know this paint.
Yeah.
Anything could happen. We might have to repaint the whole wall in Jotun afterwards, or we'll go with your option. What do you think? And then at that point, and some people have got really big issues over paint and the nasties that can be in it, which I totally respect. But we are going to have that caveat there because it is an unknown entity. It might have worked in the US, but then in the US, the ambient temperature isn't as hot as it is here. So therefore, it can cause problems. There are problems with certain Jotun products as well, I can say, but more exterior paint. So it is one of those things that just comes with experience.
So I've pulled off the tape.
You pull off the tape, you've cleaned up. And at that point, we're pretty much good to go.
Touch-ups? I might have to do some touch-ups.
Oh, yeah, you'll have touch-ups. So keep bits of paint and the different colours so that you'll be able to touch up as you go along. For touch-ups, don't use a 1/2 inch or even a 1 inch brush. Use an artist's brush. So that way you won't see it if you just use an artist's brush. If you splodge it, you will end up with a Frisian cow on your walls and ceilings.
Cow.
Yes. It looks terrible, people. Do not do it. Am I allowed to be that direct on this podcast? I hope I am.
You are. I think we've given everyone a nice little basic primer, a tutorial on painting.